Female Nazi guards, when obedience overrode humanity. When the war in Europe ended, the world was confronted with evidence that defied expectation. Courtrooms filled with former officials, uniformed personnel, and administrators. Many offered the same defense. They had obeyed orders, followed rules, done their jobs. What unsettled observers most was not only the scale of what had occurred, but who had participated in enforcing it. Among those brought to trial were women. Some young, some married, some outwardly ordinary. They appeared in photographs and newsreels, smiling, composed, even defiant. For many watching, this contradicted everything they believed about cruelty, power, and gender. Today's story is not about monsters born different from the rest of society. It is about how an authoritarian system granted power, removed accountability, and transformed individuals who once lived unremarkable lives. This is an examination of female authority within the Nazi camp system, and what it reveals about ideology, obedience, and human behavior. Female guards, known as Aufseherinnen, were not peripheral figures. They occupied defined roles within a hierarchy that valued discipline and ideological commitment over empathy. Many were recruited from ordinary backgrounds: factory workers, nurses' aides, domestic servants. Few had prior experience wielding authority. What the system offered was power, clear, protected, and rarely questioned. Newsreels recorded after the war captured these women in custody, often appearing composed or dismissive. This reaction shocked observers not because of what had been uncovered, but because of how untroubled some of the accused appeared by it. For the public, this raised a difficult question. How does someone reach a point where cruelty no longer registers as cruelty? One of the earliest and most notorious examples was Ilse Koch, the wife of a camp commandant. Her influence did not come from official rank, but from proximity to power. Within the camp environment, that distinction mattered little. Her position granted her authority over prisoners and guards alike, reinforced by the knowledge that few would challenge the commandant's household. Witness testimony later described her frequent use of punishment as a form of personal dominance rather than institutional discipline. In this environment, personal impulses carried consequences measured in suffering. What made figures like Koch especially revealing was not only what they did, but how easily the system allowed personal cruelty to merge with official function. The structure surrounding her ensured protection until it no longer served the regime's interests. Even then, accountability arrived late and imperfectly, filtered through legal processes that struggled to address crimes committed under bureaucratic cover. Other women entered the system at a younger age, shaped almost entirely by ideology. Irma Gress was one such figure. Raised under constant propaganda and social pressure, she entered camp service as a teenager. The camps became her primary environment of socialization, authority, and identity. At facilities such as Ravensbrück and later Auschwitz-Birkenau, Grese exercised authority with remarkable confidence for someone so young. Accounts from survivors describe how guards interpreted any perceived challenge as defiance, requiring immediate response. Power was not restrained by oversight. Instead, it was validated through performance. In these camps, selections, punishments, and enforcement routines blurred moral boundaries. Actions were framed as necessary tasks. Decisions were justified as procedure. Over time, violence ceased to feel exceptional. It became part of the job description. What is critical to understand is that the system did not require every guard to be ideologically fanatical. It required them to comply, repeat actions, and internalize expectations. Ambition, resentment, insecurity, and conformity all found room within this structure. The institution did the rest. Some women managed to disappear after the war, their identities absorbed back into civilian life. Hermine Braunsteiner exemplifies this phenomenon. After serving as a guard at Majdanek, she eventually emigrated and lived for years as a respected neighbor in the United States. Her past remained hidden, not because it was unknown, but because it was inconvenient to uncover. When her identity was finally exposed, the contrast was jarring. The woman known locally as polite and ordinary had once exercised deadly authority in a system designed to remove dignity. The long delay between crime and accountability reflects how easily systems allow perpetrators to merge back into society when scrutiny fades. Medical personnel added another dimension to this history. Herta Oberheiser was trained as a doctor, entrusted with professional authority long associated with care and healing. At Ravensbrück, that authority was redirected. Medical experimentation became permissible under the logic that certain lives held less value than others. The ethical collapse here did not occur overnight. It unfolded gradually as professional norms were redefined to serve ideology. Once individuals were labeled inferior, moral limits shifted. Procedures that would be unthinkable elsewhere became routine inside the camp environment. What makes this especially disturbing is how easily Oberheiser later returned to civilian medical practice after serving a minimal sentence. Institutional failure allowed professional legitimacy to be restored without meaningful reckoning, highlighting how incomplete justice remained long after the war ended. Authority within the camps was often centralized through figures such as Maria Mondl. As a senior supervisor at Auschwitz-Birkenau, Mondl oversaw large numbers of guards and enforced routines that structured daily life and death. Her power lay not only in direct action, but in administration, lists, schedules, assignments, ordinary tools transformed into instruments of large-scale harm. Mondl's role underscores a crucial point. The most devastating impact often comes not from those acting impulsively, but from those who organize, coordinate, and normalize destructive systems. Her influence shaped the behavior of others, embedding cruelty into procedure. Even elements such as music were repurposed. Camp orchestras were forced to perform during roll calls and transfers, turning cultural symbols into psychological tools. Horror was disguised by routine, made predictable, and therefore easier to manage. Across these cases, a pattern emerges. These women did not operate outside the system. They operated because of it. The structure rewarded obedience, suppressed dissent, and reframed violence as duty. Gender offered no immunity, only a different path into authority. After the war, reactions varied. Some expressed regret. Others remained defiant. Many minimized their roles, describing actions as minor or inevitable. The language of bureaucracy proved remarkably resilient, surviving even the collapse of the regime it served. What remains is a historical record that challenges easy assumptions. These women were not anomalies. They were participants in a system that functioned precisely because ordinary people filled its ranks. The camps did not depend on exceptional cruelty alone. They depended on routine, hierarchy, and obedience, conditions that can exist anywhere when power goes unchecked and ideology overrides conscience. This history does not ask us to abandon moral judgment. It asks us to apply it more carefully, to examine not only actions, but the structures that made those actions possible. Because when institutions redefine responsibility and authority protects behavior from scrutiny, the line between ordinary life and extraordinary harm becomes dangerously thin.